Thing about our elders were masters of masking things.
Right, real talk.
They were masters.
Mm,
They will be suffering tremendous pain and discomfort, but they learn how to mask it. Remember in the Caribbean and in Africa, many of your Caribbean family, they don't have much teeth in their head from they were young. They had dentures from they were in their 40s.
that's
Now
right.
that's a lot of teeth that were pulled out their heads with the pliers.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because there was no sit back in the chair, Mr. Johnson, and anesthesia and a nice nurse, tapping your mouth, take a rinse, Mr. Johnson. No, 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 no. It was one man with a case and a pliers.
That's rough. Yes, sir.
That's real.
Yes, sir.
So we were masters of bearing tremendous pain. And many of us are the same today. We're going through tremendous, illnesses, and we learn to live with it and cope with it. Where if we took the proper advice, we could get many things remedied that we're suffering from. But we just learn, tita hurt me, tita hurts me. And then you just learn, you just suck cloves, just suck a few cloves and you manage it. True?
Right, brother.
What we're talking about today is not managing it, is eliminating it. Warm welcome to you. Maybe I am a guest again. I feel like a guest because I feel very special.
You're special, yeah.
Every week I come on, I feel very special because I'm in class. And as a student of whoever is presenting, I feel very special. So yeah, I am a participant. So whatever you want to call me is dignified. So how is everybody in the listening audience? I hope you're all well and in good spirits. And looking forward to this very important conversation, this very important discussion, probably one of the most important discussions you and I will ever engage in when we're discussing womb health, uterus health. Hopefully everybody on the call or on the video came from a womb, right? And I know there's always one. but today I'm sure that I can get 100% agreement. And if we all came from the blessed womb of a woman at some point, then we need to know the value of the womb. Because my teacher taught me that the womb of the woman is the workshop of God. And every solution to every problem that, plagues humanity will be solved from the womb of a woman. The solution will come from the womb of a woman. All of our great messengers, prophets, inventors, poets, anybody who you admire, they were created, made, fashioned, molded in a blessed womb of a woman somewhere at some time. So this is going to be a very, very, very wonderful discussion, because sometimes as men, we're made to think that, that's woman's business. Oh, that's woman. And that's a major part of the problem. A major part of the problem is men's ignorance of where they're coming from and men's ignorance of the womb that, their mothers and their significant other or their wives, possess, and the real value of such. Because without a healthy womb, we as men and women can never see ourselves again in a true and proper light. So I don't want to go too much. But I think this will be a great education, not just for the women, but for us as men. So any of you as males on the line, if you've got a son, it'll be a good time to give him a little tinkle, good time to send him a message, good time to send him a link, good time, sisters, for you to, send any male you've ever had in your life who, misunderstood maybe a period between you and him because you might have had some issues biologically that nobody educated him about. And we're going to have this conversation later down the road. So please, you're here, I'm here, but guess what? Whole heap of people is not here. So send a text, send a message, and try and get as many of your relatives, of your family members, extended family members, friends, mentees, get them on the call because today we're talking more science. So please, at this time, it gives me pleasure for the second time around for us to receive our beautiful sister, Chantal Blake, who is visiting with us for the second time. And when she was first on, she was just completing her first book. And now I believe the book is ready, which she will go into some of. So, spiritual injection, please take your devices off of mute and receive our beautiful sister, Chantal Blake. Warm welcome to the spiritual injection, Sister Chantal.
Welcome.
Welcome. Thank
Oh,
you.
Thank you. It's really Walaikum salam. It's great to be back.
There you go. So the floor is yours, Sister Chantal.
Thank you, and I'm so grateful that so many of you are showing up and I'm already feeling your presence, and that's kind of how I'd like this conversation to flow. So we'll just open with what comes to mind as when you just hear the word menopause. I'd love for you to share in the chat what comes up for you. What are some of the images, some of the words? How do you associate or orient to menopause? Any symbols? What has it meant to you? What has it meant to the women in your life? Old woman, okay?
Someone posted, Chantel, that menopause, their understanding it is men have to be on pause whilst women are going through their bodily changes. Is that true?
Not quite, but we'll get into it. Hot flushes is a big one. So got a lot of hot flushes, hair loss, hardship for women, misunderstood, past childbirth, no more children. All right. Any other associations? Change in hormones. Okay.
These are all from sisters, brothers. What do you think about this? These are all women saying these things. Do we have any brothers in the audience?
Getting old. No more children. A transformation. Heart population. Okay. Mood changes and painful body. So as more coming to you, feel free to share the mood swings, right? We might have had some associations with menopause, with our experience with our own mothers or our aunties, the elder women in our life, or maybe we've seen media representations of menopause and what it means. And so tonight or this evening, our theme is really reframing perimenopause and menopause, because if we want to look at the textbook definition and the Western medical explanation, it's around us all the time, right? The hot flushes, night sweats, those are common, right? Common associations with perimenopause and menopause. But first, we're going to orient ourselves to the actual definition of what we're talking about, so we're all on the same page. A few more have come in. Headache, okay. 12 months stopping of periods, okay. Thank you, Brother Phil. We got our medical definition there of menopause, the body going through a transitional period, discomfort, right? So thank you. There were no wrong answers. I just wanted to hear what answers were coming up for you. Brain fog, that's another one that gets brought up a lot. Negative thinking, irregular cycles, body aches. Okay, so far, most of these, I would say a few of the responses have been neutral, just exactly what's happening. But I would feel like there's also a generally negative connotation for some of us, right? The idea of menopause is not necessarily something that people talk about as something that they're looking forward to. And so as we're centering into the conversation of reframing, first we're going to just name what exactly menopause is. And as Brother Phil rightfully expressed, when you have gone 12 consecutive months without a period, without a menstrual cycle, at an age-appropriate time, this is considered menopause, that your menstrual cycles have come to an end. And I say at an age-appropriate time because there are some women.
Can we all pause our devices, please, and go on mute and exercise Zoom etiquette, please? Thank you. And apologies, Sister Chantal.
No problem. So the actual ending, the reason why I say age appropriate time is because sometimes women can experience the disruption or the absence of their menstrual cycle for other reasons other than pregnancy. Okay. So there are more and more women who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s who are being told maybe you're in early menopause or that you're going through menopause early. And if you've had your uterus removed, that will force your body into menopause. And in some cases, medically, they would induce menopause if they're trying to adjust or address another hormonal or menstrual health challenge. So the menopause itself has to be at an age appropriate time because there are women who will temporarily go without a missing period, but because it's not happening at an age appropriate time, or there's another issue that needs to be addressed, particularly it could be an issue related to their body mass index, calories, stress, trauma, thyroid issues, and other issues. It may not exactly be menopause. So generally speaking, at an age appropriate time, and it's around 51 is the average age of menopause, but there's some variation depending on where you are from and your ethnicity. But generally, it's when the periods have stopped, when ovulation is no longer happening, and that menstrual cycle, that menstrual season of your life has come to a close. And this needs to happen because we don't need to be available for bearing life into our elder years. There's other work that we have for the elder years. So by design, we have to slowly unwind from this clock of ovulating every month and menstruating every month. And now the distinction between perimenopause and menopause, as was shared in the chat, perimenopause is that gradual transition where we're moving towards menopause. And so there are different opinions about how long perimenopause can last, but it basically is the approach. And it's at the point where you start to notice changes in your menstrual cycle habits, changes in your hormones that can be indicating you're drawing closer to the menopausal season. Perimenopause, some would say on average, some of the changes can start subtly beginning at around age 35, but they don't tend to be very noticeable until women are approaching their mid to late 40s. And of course, there are variations depending on a lot of factors. But one thing that needs to be addressed is that hot flushes and night sweats can happen at any point. They are not uniquely menopausal. So if you're experiencing hot flashes and night sweats, this is an expression that the body is in need of some support, but it doesn't directly mean menopause. We're just more prone to these kinds of symptoms and challenges in the menopausal transition or approaching the menopausal transition. So in the same way that when we go through puberty, our body has to learn and practice the process of ovulating, releasing an egg every month to reproduce. This is the other side. That's why perimenopause is likened to a second puberty, right? It's like the clock was turned on at puberty to have you ovulating and aligning with this monthly clock, this monthly rhythm and cycle. And now it's time to unwind out of the clock, right? Because the childbearing years are coming to a close. Now, just because changes are starting to happen, it doesn't mean that immediately ovulation is off the table, right? Women can still be fertile in their perimenopausal years, in the 40s and leading into the 50s as well, right? Until ovulation is completely over and we haven't seen menstrual cycles for an entire calendar year, it is still possible that a woman can conceive. But again, we're getting closer to that closing of that season and closing of that window. And some of the reasons why we have so many diverse symptoms connected to perimenopause and menopause is because all of our cells are impacted by estrogen. So estrogen is the primary reproductive hormone that we make in our female bodies. And because estrogen impacts so many of our cells and tissues throughout our entire body, that's why women can experience a wide variety of symptoms, because as estrogen levels decrease, as the function of our ovaries start to decrease, then our estrogen production reduces, and we can feel that in different parts of our body. If you think about estrogen in terms of its attribute and its quality, estrogen is what hydrates and nourishes our cells and tissues. So it is a very moisturizing, hydrating, nourishing, supportive hormone in the body. And so when we start to make less of it, we may notice different symptoms related to dryness, right? Hair loss, skin changes, joint aches, etc. But I think it's important to understand that this transition needs to happen by design. And how we experience it has a lot to do with how do we come to the door of perimenopause? How do we come to the door of this transition? Have we come to this transition after decades of supporting our cycles, protecting our hormones, nourishing ourselves properly, managing our self care, prioritizing rest and replenishment? Or are we already coming to the door of menopause and perimenopause bankrupt? We've already, exhausted the savings account of our vitality because we've been pushing against our design. We've been pushing ourselves to achieve, to compete, and to listen to other people's demands instead of honoring our unique female design. So that's how we can understand. And another visual I'll give you is if you were to imagine the seasons of your life like the seasons that we experience in our climates and in our environments. If summertime is the peak of your reproducing childbearing years, imagine perimenopause is like the fall. Things are starting to shift. There's a change that's happening. The actual time of menopause is likened to a winter in that there's no more bearing, right? It's a time of shedding and releasing. But that doesn't mean a woman remains in winter. In traditional Chinese medicine, they have a beautiful analogy that after menopause is the second spring, that it is a rebirth and initiation into eldership, into wise womanhood, into sage essence or becoming a sage. So it's important that we resist or at least interrogate and challenge this idea that it's all downhill after menopause. There is actually a wisdom in the design and a process that needs to happen for us to emerge as leaders on the other side. And I really love looking at traditional cultures and how they have historically recognized perimenopause and menopause. And for some cultures, they've recognized that this is a time of rebirth, as I shared. It's a second spring, right? A new coming. It's a stepping into communal leadership. It's a stepping into a different level of responsibility to the collective because you're no longer in that season of primarily caring for your family or your immediate projects or the development of your kind of early career family and these very demanding tasks that keep us focused on the inner unit. But as we're no longer bringing forth life, no longer childbearing, it allows us to be available for the collective. It allows us to step into new roles and new possibilities that shape the collective, right? And so some cultures believe that women's spiritual maturity and spiritual intuition heightens at this time. There are some cultures that literally appoint women as leaders when they are in this menopausal season. And then there are also other perspectives that help us see that it's understood for this transition to happen. There is a self-care that's needed. There's a slowing down. My husband is really into martial arts. And so one of the ways I like to liken it is to the difference between Kung Fu and Tai Chi. And so if you've ever seen Tai Chi, Tai Chi is exactly Kung Fu, but it's slowed down, right? It's done in a very intentional and a very deliberate way. And I feel like some of us in the hustle of our youth, we're doing a lot of Kung Fu, a lot of kicking, fighting, chopping. We're doing a lot of multitasking. But moving through the menopausal journey, I liken it to the time of Tai Chi, where there's intention and there's the cultivation of energy, not the exertion of energy. And so a lot of the challenges that women are experiencing, they're very real physiologic challenges. I'm not going to belittle them. And so we're going to go through some of those challenges, but we're also going to go through some supportive solutions. So some of the most evident changes that women will tend to notice are pelvic related symptoms. And so the irregularity of cycles is a common one. And some people will tell you that Cycles tend to be a little bit shorter, so women may have their menstrual cycles a little bit more frequently, and then eventually they'll get further apart. But again, how this happens can vary to the individual. This doesn't happen for every woman because every woman is unique. And again, like I said, what she's bringing to the door of this transition is going to shape her experiences. It's like the capacity and the resources she has available. It's according to what she brings with her. And so their irregular menstrual cycles is a common feature of this transition. Another common feature one might notice is vaginal dryness or changes in libido. And so that's something to also be mindful of because, again, we said estrogen is that hydrating, that nourishing of our tissues. And so this is an area where we need to have some sensitivity as well as some preparation around. There are also vasomotor challenges. And so this is when we're talking about the hot flushes and night sweats, the way that the vascular changes are happening, the dilation and contraction, again, impacted by estrogen, the quality of the tissues, the quality of those vessels are impacted by estrogen as well. And so some of the things we might also notice is the sweating, the hair thinning, the skin thinning. These are some of the other changes that are very noticeable as well. Mobility changes because, again, estrogen also impacts our joints, the lubrication and hydration of our joints. We may notice more loss of muscle mass, and we may notice weight gain, right? Especially mid-belly weight gain because we can also derive estrogen from fatty tissue. So even though the ovaries are not going to be making as much estrogen, we're going to be relying on our adrenal glands, which are our glands above our kidneys, for more hormonal support. And some of that little few extra pounds, a little bit of that fatty tissue also helps us to sustain estrogen levels. Cognitive changes, which are very common, is brain fog or challenges with concentration and memory. And so one way of looking at this is that we understand that the brain becomes a little bit less responsive to glucose with some of these hormonal changes. But I myself have not gone through the menopausal transition, but when I sit with my elders and I talk to them about this, they shared with me that they remember a season of brain fog and these brain challenges, but then they also saw a rite of passage and they remember clearly when it lifted on the other side. And so something that I like to think about it as, when you become a mother, your brain actually changes. There are connections that are pruning so that you can be primed for the role of mother. There's a certain instinctive, intuitive knowing that you have to access that's more important than the list of things to do and remembering presidents and other random pieces of information we've been given, right? So there's a pruning that happens. And similarly, the perimenopausal time could be another time of pruning, where how we need to use our brain, how we need to move in our bodies needs to change and transition for the eldership that's on the other side. And eldership is not all like old senior citizens. It's stepping into an inner knowing and it's showing up for the community as a wise woman. And some of the psychological changes that we might notice are, like many mentioned, mood changes. For some, insomnia, irritability, right? These are some of the other symptoms that we can keep in mind or that we might notice. And again, what's unique about estrogen is that estrogen is also so concerned with keeping the group intact and keeping everyone together. And sometimes when we start to have less estrogen circulating in our system, some would call it a little bit like a truth serum, in that whatever has been ignored, suppressed, or neglected is now coming to surface. I interviewed a woman who's a writer, and she said, my menopausal transition was like the shifting of tectonic plates. The things I was trying to bury underneath, they started to come up. And so for our brothers who are very well represented here, if you love and care for a woman who is going through this perimenopausal and menopausal journey, know that it's a time of restructuring also for your relationships. There might have been patterns and habits that you've grown accustomed to that no longer serve this wise woman who's emerging. And that can be challenging to navigate. And so we really need to approach this time with compassion. And especially if this woman is not in community, she hasn't been supported or eldered by aunties and elders in her community, and she's going through it alone, it could be very frightening, right? You're wondering, what's happening to my body? What's happening to my mind? If she's not in a circle of women that can really call her into remembrance of, this is a rite of passage, this is a transition, then it can be a really isolating time. And so it's often said that mental health challenges can really show up at this time for our perimenopausal and menopausal sisters, and sometimes relationship changes and marital conflict. But again, if we approach this time as a transition for us all, right, to renegotiate how do we need to be in this post childbearing, in this post youth season of our lives, I think it's an opportunity for us to know ourselves much more authentically and to have more authentic connection in our relationships as well. And so, if we were to connect a lot of the physiologic changes that I shared, the hot flushes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, where we want to really focus our attention is nourishing our kidneys, right? I said our adrenal glands are going to be responsible for the majority of our hormonal production when our ovaries are functioning less effectively. And the adrenal glands are two glands that sit above our kidneys. Now, if adrenal sounds familiar to you, adrenal is related to adrenaline. The adrenal glands are also responsible for our stress response. So if we are not conscious about how we are caring for our adrenal glands and our kidneys as a whole and as an organ, then the demands of a stressful lifestyle and now carrying this hormonal load can be a lot, right? So one of the fundamental things that need to happen is in this transition is managing stress, because honestly, the female design no longer has the capacity to manage stress in a resilient way as it could when we were in our younger years, when we were in our childbearing, ovulating, peak estrogen making years. Okay. So that's the first key to this season of life, is to slow down in an intentional way, to minimize stress. The perimenopausal season, again, like I said, if it's a time for pruning, being conscious about what activities, what relationships, and what exchanges are depleting you instead of rejuvenating you and replenishing you. It's a time where the people pleasing comes to an end. It's a time where the authentic self needs to be heard and needs to be honored. Another way that we can support the kidneys, right, by one, managing stress, so we're not overburdening our stress response system. We also want to pay attention to foods and herbs that are nourishing for the kidneys. So if you are looking for herbs to start supplementing, if you're struggling with hot flashes and night sweats, you want to look for herbs in your region that are considered kidney tonics. They bring more tone, strength, and capacity to the kidneys. And when there's dryness in the body, then that's when we have to turn to the kidneys as well. And how do we remedy these symptoms of dryness and excess heat in the body? We look at foods that are cooling and that are lubricating. So you can put in the chat, if I ask you, what is a food that you believe has a lubricating quality to the body? What comes to mind? Think about foods that have a okra. Y'all are on it today, right? Everybody, we got 4 okras, right? All right. So we've got some avocado, we've got some melons, cucumber, right? So raw foods have a hydrating effect, right? Cucumber, melon, very hydrating. So we definitely want to lean into our hydrating fruits and veggies because they help to, like I said, hydrates. Okay. Sea moss, another great lubricating food. So we want to have that hydration coming in through our foods. If we're drinking water, we want to be mindful of the quality of water. And if the quality of water we have access to is not rich in minerals, then we can add trace minerals to our water. So we want to be really conscious of bringing in hydrating foods, these very gelatinous, stretchy foods like our sea moss, like our okra. Tapioca can have that stretchy consistency. We also have certain kinds of greens. When you cook them, they give you that stretchy stickiness. So really, slippery elm is another option as well. So there are certain herbs that give us that real gelatinous, stretchy, hydrating, nourishing, kind of lubricating effect in the body. And those tend to be foods that are supportive of the kidney. And there are other foods like royal jelly, for example. Foods that are dark and sweet tend to have an affinity for the kidneys. And when it comes to challenges around like vaginal dryness, UTIs, or painful intercourse, then we need to make sure that there's intentional care, right, for the vulva and vagina. And so, because again, estrogen is changing tissue. I don't know if any of you saw Halle Berry. Halle Berry has been advocating a lot for menopause right now and appearing on different shows and going to, the U.S. administrators advocating for more funding for research on menopause. And she was actually misdiagnosed because she said she was experiencing bleeding after intercourse, and she was told, oh, maybe you have herpes. But no one was actually educating her that you're moving through menopause. Your tissues are thinning, so you have to have more care for your uterine health, your vulval health, your vaginal health. And so some of the ways that we can nourish this intimate part of our bodies are actually herbal sitz baths and soaks, vaginal steams. Sitting in herbal baths is a great way to get some hydrating, nourishing support to the sensitive tissues that are changing. Okay. And so we have to be aware and conscious of the changes our bodies are going through and meet them with an appropriate response. As for the memory and cognitive changes, for some people, like I said, if there is a pruning that's happening, we also need to be more clear on what we're focusing on. It's not the season for multitasking, it's a season for monotasking, really dropping into one task and doing it with excellence and with presence and doing it well. And also, if we're having other memory and cognitive challenges, we can look at different herbal supports to nourish the blood, to nourish the brain, to get more circulation. One of my teachers also stresses the importance of digestion. So when she sees women she's an acupuncturist, and when she sees women struggling with a lot of cognitive challenges, she says they need to work on their digestion, because the quality of blood that you build is only as strong as the quality of your digestion. So supporting your digestion, making sure that you're eating well, right? That you're having diverse foods, that you're having probiotic rich foods if needed. And also some new emerging research that's coming up is actually the benefit of fasting. And so when women are fasting, and I don't advocate for a lot of fasting in the childbearing years, because it's a time where there's a lot of demands on the body. But as we're moving towards the menopausal years, there is an effect that ketones have on the brain that tends to help with cognition challenges. And so intermittent fasting or eating one meal a day, these can be really helpful for our menopausal sisters as well. But again, with support, knowing how your blood sugar is being managed, especially if you have any blood sugar conditions, you want to do that with the support of a practitioner. Making sure that you're getting all of the macronutrients you need for your thriving health, and making sure that you're keeping stable blood sugar. But ketones and ketobiotic fasting tends to have a positive impact on brain function as well. And when it comes to weight gain and some of the weight gain challenges, like I said, some of that fat is really protective and supportive because it helps to make estrogen as well. We don't need to be very lean in our elder years. It actually is protective of our bones to have some cushion, right? Because, Allah forbid, if we have a fall, if we have an accident, having some fat around the bones, not restrictive fat, not can't get out of bed, can't move, can't prostrate. I'm not talking about that level of fat, but I'm talking about a little bit of cushion for some of our joints and bones that could be sensitive to fracture in our elder years if we're too frail. So a little bit of weight gain is to be expected, but we want to pay attention to our metabolism, and how we support our metabolism as it's changing, as it's slowing down a bit, is we want to build muscle mass. So it's an important time. If you've never lifted before, this is when, my sisters, 40 plus, we need to start lifting. We actually need to start building muscle mass. And this is going to help our resistance, our insulin resistance. It's also going to help with our metabolic health. And we also want to make sure that we're eating meals that are focused around protein and limiting our carbs, especially if they're processed carbs. Okay. So this is not, I'm not saying we need to eat like a keto diet specifically. We need to build our meals around quality protein. That's going to be really important. But like I said, simultaneously building muscle, right? Putting some weight, right? Doing some lifting, at least 2 to 3 times a week as we're moving through our 40s and beyond. And then for some of the psychosocial support, right? I think it's really important that we spend some time really looking at our story about menopause. If our story about menopause has been negative, right? If we've been told and taught that it's just all downhill, you're dried up, no one wants you, you're not young anymore, you're not youthful anymore, then this creates this internal conflict. And it even questions, to some extent, the design, right? We're not designed to function as if we're in our 20s and 30s into our 70s and 80s. A natural transition needs to happen. So how can we support ourselves in a positive way? How can we be around women and men who have a more positive narrative around menopause, so that we're not just regurgitating and fighting with ourselves, just trying to stay young, right? We see a lot of fighting to stay young. Uh, People will just say to you, if you're making less estrogen, just take hormone therapy and just take it until the day you die. We don't want to have aging. We don't want to have wrinkles, etc. And it's almost like we're not embracing aging, and we can embrace aging in a beautiful and strong way, but we don't have to keep fighting ourselves because we're not youth anymore. Like, it's actually a blessing that we've lived long enough to not be youth anymore. However, we do want to build community around these conversations so that we don't feel isolated. Like I said, mental health can be very vulnerable with all of these changes happening all at once. So our sisters need to be centered in communities. They need to be in circle with other women. Informally or formally, you need to be with your circle of women to remind you, to support you, to advise you and counsel you. And also know that there are going to be, this is a new way of moving, right? The way you're saying yes and no to your life invitations, your expectations, it's going through a transition, and that's okay. And we also want to make sure we're creating an ecosystem of support. This is a time where your typical doctor may not be able to support you in a holistic way. If all they can offer you is hormone therapy, then you might need to tap into alternative practitioners. You might need to bring an acupuncturist into your life. How can I tap into getting more hydration and circulation in my body? How can I bring in maybe a pelvic floor therapist if you're having pelvic challenges? Bring them into your ecosystem. Have an herbalist in your ecosystem, right? Have movement specialists, right? Have ways that you move that are playful and enjoyable and nourishing for you. This is a time where the typical go to the GP or go to your doctor is not likely going to give you the depth and the breadth of answers that you need. Because what happens is women are going to their doctors and saying, my memory, my mood, I'm dealing with these feelings, and they're put on antidepressants. Antidepressants and hormonal therapy are not the solutions for menopause. Menopause needs to happen, but you get to decide how it happens, right? You get to decide what resources you're bringing into this transition. And so overall, if we were to really reduce this time to like key practices that are going to nourish you and nourish the women that you love in this time and in this transition, we want to be mindful of giving them space, minimizing stress, right? Maximizing rest, and not just sleep. Sleep and rest, activities that are restful, that are rejuvenating. We also want to be supportive. We talked about our nourishing foods, our hydrating, our lubricating foods, if needed, some very specific pelvic care and vulval care. And we want to make sure that we're supporting our gut health, our liver, our nervous system. Any part of you that's been neglected up until this point, it's going to come, right? It's going to demand your attention. So it's a time where self-care becomes non-negotiable, and your body will demand, if you don't listen to those nudges, your body will start to demand from you that you take your health make it a priority that you take your wellness, make it a priority, and know that everyone around you will benefit from your well-being, right? So you feeling good in your body is sufficient, but know that everyone around you is also going to get the full benefit of your thriving health, your support, your self-care, your boundaries, right? These boundaries are necessary because, like I said, this is a wise woman in construction, right? This is a construction zone. So brothers, approach tenderly, approach with care, approach with compassion, and approach with patience because she has to get used to her new body and her new changes, and you have to get used to this new person who's becoming as well. So I'll open the floor now for some comments and questions. And thank you for the comments that have been shared so far.
Well, allow me to start off that process by first thanking you for the wonderful information that you just shared with us. As said in the beginning, I look forward to being a guest, even though I'm a presenter, not even a presenter, a co-host every week because I'm in school. And thank you for schooling us. And so my line of question before we go to the wider audience is, why is this information not taught in schools?
I think you asked me the same question 2 years ago when we were talking about the menstrual
quite
cycle.
a consistent fella. So, so tell me, why is it not taught in school? It seems almost like a travesty.
Why is it not taught in medical school is the question. So I have, there are menopause summits and they'll interview, OBGYNs who are also menopausal, and they will tell you, I've had 30 minutes on menopause. I had maybe 1 hour on this topic. So even the female doctors themselves, when they go through menopause, they don't have the resources that they need to be supported because not even in medical school are they getting this information. So I think there is part of the big problem. There's an overall problem that women's health is not made a funding priority or a research priority.
Apart from fertility.
To some extent. With anything else related to women's health, fitness and women's health, women tend to be not seen as a priority for funding. And oftentimes, because we cycle, we don't get consistent research results. So oftentimes people say, well, women are just too complicated as test subjects. It's easier for us to work with men because men, you have a 24-hour hormonal cycle. So every 24 hours, your hormones reset. Our hormonal cycle is more lunar, and it's not really solar, like day up, day, like sun up, sundown. It's a bit more lunar. And so because we go through these monthly cycles, the way that you test how I respond to food and nutrition one part of the month is not the same as another because my metabolism already changed. If I've ovulated, my metabolism is different than it was before I ovulated. If I'm lifting weights, my ability to build muscle is different depending on where I am in that hormonal cycle. And so the question of why we're not being taught this is, there is a lack of making women's health a true priority. That's a big part of it. It's not even being taught in medical school, so it's not trickling down for sure. And I also feel like, the capitalistic, maybe it's not exclusively capitalistic, but sometimes this model of just go, 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 produce, produce, produce. Take whatever pill, do whatever surgery you need, just keep on going, keep on producing. And so I don't think there's a lot of attention given to this need to slow down, to have unique care for the woman. It's like pop a pill and keep it pushing, keep going, keep showing up for work, keep showing up for school, keep getting the job done. So I think it's also a big cultural issue we have as well.
Yes, I know we have a masterclass with you on Saturday. And I just arrived back from the US and we celebrated Mother's Day last Sunday, May the 11th. So isn't that super hypocritical for us to set aside one day for Mother, but not really invest in really showing the world what Mother actually goes through in order to be a mother? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I feel like it's really just a Hallmark, greeting card fabricated holiday as I understand and believe, because if we cared about mothers, we would have real maternal leave after mothers give birth, right? We would have childcare so mothers can
Right.
work. We would have free childcare. We would have pelvic floor rehabilitation for mothers. In France, it's like a well-known thing that when women give birth in France, nurses come to their home to care for them. Pelvic floor specialists come to their home to make sure they don't have prolapse, that they're not having incontinence, that they're not having sexual health issues. So, if we really cared for mothers, we would create policies and structures that center and honor mothers, not just another excuse to buy roses and cards.
Right. So would you say the ignorance, both male and female, because many women are very ignorant about this aspect and transition of their lives also just hits them like a ton of bricks and they have to
Mm.
deal with it accordingly. And I don't think it's traditionally in our culture, for mothers to sit their daughters down and go through this whole transformation way ahead of time. You're probably one of the most prepared women for menopause that exist on planet Earth, right? So
Mm.
because you are so well endowed with the wisdom of what is coming, then you can obviously attest to the signs when they come. So do you think the ignorance of this subject matter on the male side and on the female side, bearing in mind what you said earlier, that this period represents a metamorphosis, like a total change of the being, right? So
Yeah.
isn't that a perfect recipe for the destruction of relationships?
Mm.
Because if the woman doesn't know what she's about to go through and the man hasn't got a clue on planet Earth, then how are we going to maintain something that is an anomaly to the pair of us?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the challenge we have if we don't have community, right? If we don't have our
And we don't, for
we
the
don't we
most
don't we don't have elder couples saying, "Hey, this is what this transition is like. This is how you're going to have to support your partner in this space and in this time." It definitely it puts a strain on a lot of relationships. This ignorance, as a result of this ignorance, it puts a lot of strain. And so I'm just imagining if historically we were in cultures that made this a collective matter, a matter of celebration, a matter of recognition, a matter of, really holding you through that transition, then that would be such a great investment in our marital health and our relationship health as well. But yeah, it's a time where big things tend to happen connected or simultaneously, right? Whether it's changes, relationship changes, divorce. Sometimes there's empty nest happening as well. If you've raised children and they're out of the house, sometimes you're moving through economic challenges. So it's definitely a process for couples that this is the make or break. We're either going to forge through and come out iron solid on the other side, or it will break us if we're not willing to step up, if we're not willing to be transformed by it. Then yes, I'm sure that it can be hugely devastating if we think it's going to be business as usual.
Right. So let me marginalize myself and sideline myself. Sister Sylvina, you're on mute.
Thank
Unlike
you for what
unlike
you.
unlike you to be on mute.
I know. Thank you for what you shared so far, Chantal. I was wondering, when you spoke about it's how you turn up at the door of this premenopausal period determines the experience that you have. So I was wondering if then a woman can do things to ensure that it's a pleasant experience, or not. Can the woman do that? Can it? Is there a formula for that?
I believe so. I believe that it starts with really knowing your own cycle as it is, right?
Mhm.
So understanding your menstrual cycle and starting to care for yourself in a very intentional way, learning to rest, learning to be able to receive rest, like allowing yourself to not feel like you have to earn rest, but that you just you can rest. I think is such a powerful part of that preparation. I think getting comfortable with self-care, modifying how we're eating there, like all of these practices are very intentional and very supportive to make sure we're bringing as much resource as possible to ourselves. I would also say that so traditionally what women would start to do at a certain age is they would just start to take tonics, right? The different herbal tonics at a certain part in their life that are supportive for the transition as well. But I think more than anything, it's starting to get really aware of how you're depleting yourself and how you're replenishing yourself. What is that relationship with depletion and replenishment? Because the more that we get comfortable with caring for ourselves, slowing down, prioritizing what our needs are, being clear about our boundaries, I think that's going to be a really great terrain, almost like a training space for what's to come. And one of the mirrors that I learned from my teacher, she said, the even though I said so the way that I described it as we can look at our womanly cycles or our womanly seasons as true seasons, right? I said summer is like your peak reproductive years and perimenopause is like your autumn. In the menstrual cycle, we also have a model of seasons, and the season that is the autumn of your menstrual cycle is your luteal phase, and this is the time before your periods, time before you menstruate. And so that's also a really powerful training ground. How do you manage the changes that happen in your own life after you've had that peak energy and that peak summer and that ovulation? How are you caring for yourself? How are you nourishing yourself? How are you responding to the changes that you feel in your body? And so this is why they say that phase can almost be like a mirror. If the week or week and a half before your period is disastrous, then it's time to start listening in. It's time to start making amends because this is the training ground for this larger luteal or this larger autumn phase of your life where you're in a pivot, you're in a transition, and your body is saying, hey, I need you to care for me. I need you to make me a priority. So those are what I would say, the practices I've mentioned and starting to really lean into your cycles as they are now and start upping your care and your consideration and your compassion for yourself.
Thank you. And that's assuming that the woman is not doing these things already. Because if the woman's doing these things already, then she just continues to do what?
Just continue. Yeah, for sure. And as things come up, right? If you're noticing something new, then again, build that ecosystem of support. Like I said, not every problem is run to the doctor. Some of it might be, I need to talk to my herbalist. I need to talk to my naturopath. Let me check in with my acupuncturist. Maybe I need to have some routine self-care practices that I start putting on my calendar. So yeah, it's a reflection of what's to come, I believe.
Thank you. And one more question. It's gone. It was to do with the it's gone.
I can help you whilst you're
Thank you.
whilst you're sorting out
Thank you.
your thoughts that travel at 24 billion.
Yeah.
Let me ask Sister Chantal, why do you think, Sister Chantal, that even with this whole subject, why is it at least not taught thoroughly in all girls' schools?
I mean, I don't even know if periods are properly taught in all girls school. It's like, this is how you use a pad, and these are pain meds. And I feel like we don't even give girls proper body literacy. I think from the beginning, women are not really taught how to respond or understand why their bodies do what they do, what do their symptoms mean, and how does your body even function. And I feel like a testament to this is that I work with grown women who still don't know very basic things about how the body works, right? They don't know. I have no idea. Oh, I can't get pregnant any day of the month. No, you only ovulate once a month. So grown women, mothers, elders, have been moving through life with a deficit of body literacy, unfortunately. And some would say that if we had true body literacy, then we would have more sovereignty over our bodies. We would
Right.
be less dependent on the medical industrial complex. We would be less dependent on this conveyor belt of like pharmaceutical
Right.
dependency. So
So,
some would say that there's profit to be made off of our ignorance.
sure. So it sounds like there's a lot of work to do for some active females who see women's health and, the prosperity of women as a priority. So if we could get a group of women to take women's health seriously and their lack of um, um, their lack of representation seriously, we could transform the world, couldn't we?
For sure. I mean, that's why my book is written for preteens and teens, because we're learning this too late. This is information. Imagine if we came into puberty knowing this about our cycles, knowing that the way we eat and the way we sleep and the way we manage our emotions and our stress impact our periods. No, we're told painful periods are normal, heavy bleeding is normal. Just get on with it. And we keep getting on with it until later on we discover we're having difficulty conceiving, we're having fibroids, we're having PCOS and endometriosis. And this is what we're going to dive into on Saturday. There is a womb health crisis. And
Right.
that's what we're going to address in the masterclass. How did we get here? What are some of the current challenges we need to face head on? And what are some solutions?
Fantastic. And hopefully, henceforth, we will be able to have women have these kind of forums on a regular and frequent basis. Isn't that what's needed also?
For sure, for sure. I mean, I love just women being together, reading, book clubs. I'm always just encouraging people, get the folks together, get the women together where you are. Start having conversations and let that be the opening point. Let's make it not taboo and shameful just to even say the word period, or God forbid a pad fall out of your bag, right? We have a lot of work to do because there's still so much period shame, even taboos. You can't talk about this. No one can see your pad, hide pads from everybody. And your husband, your dad, no one can know you're on your period. We have a lot of cultural unraveling to do as well.
I'm glad you said that. Everybody in the audience, okay, we got a few more minutes. So, Brianna, you've been quite patient. So, would you like to? Can we allow Brianna to take her device off of mute? Hey,
let's unmute her. Do we need
let's
to
unmute her, please? We
Here we
unmute.
go. There you go. I'm here. Sorry.
Hey,
Thank you.
Brianna, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
It's midday for me, so I'm working. But I actually had a few questions. I'll ask just two for now. One of them is, from what
You're
I've
so
studied.
kind. You said just two.
From what I've studied, a 3-4 day cycle is actually normal. Anything above that means that there's something incorrect in the body. That was one of the questions. And the other question is, you talked about fasting, and especially during childbearing years. Now, I won't say the actual quote because I don't have actual facts, but one of our teachers have talked about the different ages and when you should start fasting more. Of course, we're taught to at least do our 1 meal a day, but when it comes to like maybe every other day, stuff like that, you wait until after childbearing years. Can you touch on the fasting a little more?
Sure. So as for the menstrual cycle, what's optimal? I mean, there's a wide variety of expressions of our menstrual cycle based on, again, our environment, how we're eating, a lot of factors. But optimally, we would say a 4-day flow is optimal. And when I say flow, I mean the actual flow where you need a period product. Some women have spotting on the front end and the back end, but ideally 4 days of a flow, light to medium, and then to light again, but never heavy, never clotted, never you're soaking through everything, can't leave the house. That's never healthy. And as for fasting, so it's important to make sure we're nourishing ourselves adequately when we're in our childbearing years, because there's a lot of demands on our body. So I was saying that as we're moving beyond the childbearing years, we may find more tolerance for fasting, and it can help with getting ketones into the brain, which can improve brain function because glucose is not entering the brain as easily.
Very good. Very good. So,
Yeah,
Paulina Bay. Sorry, Sylvia, you're going to say something?
I said we have a few questions in the chat, so after Paulina asks her question.
Yeah, we'll skim through because we've only got another 15 minutes. Paulina?
Grand risings, or yeah. So obviously, I'm a bit of a taboo, and I'll be probably people might see mine what I'm going to say.
We'll just delete you and get rid of you. It's not hard.
Right. So with the taboo, if a woman is 60, there's a taboo there as well, because if she wants a baby, the taboo is there. Even though she's past her menopause, it's said in Africa that a woman, they still can give a woman herbs that she can produce to have a baby again. Now, the taboo now would be around that, but yet still before, if everybody say they believe in the Bible, didn't Sarah have her baby in 8? She didn't probably see periods, and then when she did, she had baby in age. So this menopause, most of it is linked to the what these people are doing to stop women having baby. You know, I believe it's the food. Well, some of it is natural, but some of it is the foods and the, you know, the processes, what's happening in this world. But naturally, a woman shouldn't be feeling period pains.
So what's the question, though, Paulina?
So the question is, all right, the question is that, do you believe that women, that you know, in the natural way, without interference, that a woman shouldn't be going through menopause at 50? Menopause can be up into 70s and 80s.
You're starting to answer your own question now.
Okay, well, that's me. I get confused sometimes, and I go all the way around.
Okay, so you go around with, you start with a question,
I yield the floor. I yield the floor. I yield the floor. I let that lady talk.
And I'm just going to say before Chantal comes in, because a lot of us quote the Bible and we quote it out of context. So please be mindful that it was God himself who said to Sarah that she was going to have a baby in her latter years, and she didn't believe God. She actually, you know, she smiled and like, really. And so therefore, you have to quote that in context. That the child she bore was of divine fulfillment of prophecy. But anyway, Chantal.
I do. So, you know, I used to live in Senegal, and yes, it's very common for mothers to be having babies while their daughters are having babies. And so there's definitely a different childbearing continuum, is what I'll call it, depending on where you are and your context, the environment that you're in, heritage for sure. So that's a factor. I would say that, you know, definitely in some cases, you know, obviously Allah does what he wills. So, you know, it's very possible by divine intervention for people to, you know, have children in their later years. But I think it's also something that we realize that there's a conservation of energy that happens when we're no longer childbearing, that we can pour that energy into other spaces. And so that's kind of been the collective. If a person has not had a child up until the 50s, and I know that that's like a big hope for them, there are things that women can do to continue ovulating. I know a couple of practitioners where women have stopped menstruating for like 6 years, and they were able to reestablish their ovulation so that they could conceive. But that's often when the menopause happened prematurely through other hormonal reasons and, you know, stress and other factors. So it is possible, I believe, to protect your ovulation so that it extends as long as possible. And I do know of women who are still having monthly periods and ovulating monthly in their 50s. And it's a trait in their family. They say, this is what my mom and my sisters, we all just...
Right. My sister was saying that there are drugs that could be taken, or herbs rather, that could be
Herbs
taken in Africa that could
within range.
reinstitute this whole process of childbearing?
I think within range. I mean, if you're, I think if you're still within your 50s, there are women who can conceive in their 50s. It's not as common for sure, but if you've gone through menopause in your 40s, there may be a chance to reestablish your ovulation. That's possible.
Right.
I've seen that happen. But like
Answer me this.
60s, 70s, 80s, I don't I don't see how we have the physical capacity to carry children and breastfeed them and chase after them. Like it just becomes a huge demand on the elder body.
Yeah, and it's a heck of an ambition in your 80s. But anyway, question in regards to male menopause, is that really something that is insulting to women, where men are just tagging this on? Oh, I'm a man, I have menopause too. Is that diminishing of what women have to go through?
Good one. I haven't thought much about it. I guess I heard the idea of male menopause a while ago and I never got back to it. I never got back to it. So I'm gonna have to let a brother step in and I'll be in the guest. I'll be the student and I'll have to let a
Because I'm
brother.
hoping no brother's got any eggs on the call.
I mean, as we biologically, men should be able to reproduce well into their elder years because their sperm production doesn't stop. So I don't know enough about men's hormones. That's not my specialty.
Okay, so let's park the male menopause. Let's pause that. So, Serena, there were a few more questions.
There was one question asking whether you can recommend a time of the month where it's better to build. Where you spoke of, let me give you the context. You spoke about building muscle mass,
Right.
and about it being more effective or less effective at different parts of the month. Do you know of a specific part of that cycle that may lend itself to, better muscle mass development?
The follicular phase. So this is the phase where you're moving towards ovulation. So post period towards ovulation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're doing intensity. If you're doing intense workout, then you can build muscle before ovulation better. After ovulation, if you work too intensely, you'll waste muscle. So resistance training is more recommended after you've ovulated.
Okay, thank you. The next question was, you referred to quality protein. What do you define as quality protein? Can you give us some examples? Or
I'm not a nutritionist,
right.
and so I often will say that the test of if you're eating enough protein is how satiated you are, right, after the meal without digestive issues. So if you're eating enough protein in a meal, you should feel full for a minimum of 4 to 5 hours. If you eat a meal and you feel like I need a sweet, I got a craving, that often tells us that the quality of protein you're eating was either not enough or not meeting your need. It also is very specific on the digestion of the individual because not everyone has the same capacity to digest different types of proteins. And so that's another factor to consider. And the last, I feel like, also has to do with like our biology. I think some of us historically centered our diets around certain proteins and some of us did not. So I think there are a couple of factors to put into play, but nutrition is not my expertise.
Can I ask you, Sister Chantal, are there environmental triggers that seem to cause early or defer the menopause in women?
A good question. I know generally we have endocrine disruptors that are really evident around us. So artificial fragrances, any kind of artificial fragrances, our phthalates, contact with parabens, plastics, BPA, all of these in general disrupt our hormones. And so which would be specifically for menopause causing it early. There's not one that I'm singling out, but I just know generally many of us are experiencing all kinds of hormonal dysfunction because we're surrounded by chemicals that didn't even exist, a few decades ago. So generally, I would say the plastics and the fragrances seem to be the two biggest challenges to just everyone's hormonal well-being. I mean, even with couples and women that I work with, I'm hearing more even with male fertility issues as well. So I think it's something that's affecting all of us, to be honest.
And do you think with that, what you just mentioned, it's very important point, because I think we have the greatest number of centennials in Cuba in the world. And Cuba's been under an embargo for like many decades and lack many of these products, these so-called body care products. They don't have it in Cuba for the most part. But they live a lot longer and the people are a lot more healthy. So that type of environment, an environment free of these kinds of products, it seems that it does have a major effect. If you look at that as a criteria, no?
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, because if they're not having the same kind of poor junk food coming in to their borders, like there's a very big difference between if you want a crisp and you cut them potatoes and fry it yourself, is very different from you buying something coated in MSG and red number 40, and so it's true. If you had to make your own fast food, it would still be better quality than anything we can find for $2.99 or whatever.
Because we wouldn't be having a smoke and then handling the bread, right? So just as we wind down, is there any last questions, Sylvina? And we're going to speak about this masterclass on Saturday and its importance, because we need to be having more classes like this, I would have thought, right? Those of you in the audience who believe that is true, can you put a 1 in the chat, please? Because this should be taught every day, I would have thought. So, Sylvina, last question, please.
Okay. I'm going to give it to the person in the chat. So I do have one, but I'll give it to the person in the chat. So the question in the chat was surrounding HRT. I'm going to read it as is. Are you saying that we should not engage in HRT? That's how the question reads.
Yes, I read it. I see it. And I wanted to come back to that one. So I believe that people need to have full information. I don't think that we're actually being truly informed if we're not being informed of the full consequences, the alternatives. I know that for some people, the hormonal changes are really challenging their mental health. And if HRT gives them a window out of a crisis, then I think there is a space for it to be used in a very low dose for a very short period of time. But that can't be a plan. That's not like a plan for menopause. We don't have any experience, knowledge, or foundation for believing that long-term hormonal supplementing, like artificial synthetic hormones or even bioidentical, are perfectly safe in the long term. I think that we also need to give space for adjusting our lifestyle to fit the hormones that we still make and that we do make. So I'm not in a position, it's not for me to decide that for someone else, because for some people, they find themselves, again, coming at the door so depleted that they're on the verge of a mental health crisis. And if, like I said, if HRT takes the edge off of that for them, or if it gets them to the other side where they can start to look at more sustainable solutions, and that's their choice to make. But I would say that you still have to do the work. HRT can't do the work for you because you ingest it in your body and your digestion still has to break it down. So you still have to support your gut health. Your liver is going to metabolize it. So you still have to support your metabolic health, your kidney health. So there's no shortcut to the work of you stepping into your self-care, but it may take the edge off of a really challenging time for women. And it should be used only as needed at the lowest dose possible. And I would say under more holistic support, I feel like naturopathic practitioners, acupuncturists, functional medicine practitioners have a more comprehensive way of approaching low dose use that you're not building a dependency on it, but like just getting it through a rough patch like a crutch.
Very good. So, Sister Chantal, tell us a bit more about the book that you have that is available.
Yeah, so in 2023, September 20th, 2023, I self-published my first book. I should say, because it was a community effort. My first book, Peaceful Periods, Holistic Womb Care for Teens. And it is the summation of all of the holistic resources and tools that every girl and woman should know: how to have a healthy menstrual cycle, how to support her hormonal wellness, and who are her allies in navigating a peaceful period and having a peaceful period. So we have the representation of homeopathy, acupuncture, vaginal steaming, nutritional therapy, all kinds of holistic practices. And it's a very easy to read book with your youth. But honestly, most of the women and even my own mom reads it and she's like, I didn't know this. I'm still learning so much. So it's a book that I wrote for us so that our daughters are not our age just discovering what we're learning now, and they can grow with this foundation and not feel like going through period pain is a rite of passage to endure. They can have peaceful periods from the start with the right tools, support, and information.
Very good. And how can I get my hands on one?
I'll put a link in the chat for you.
Please do.
And it's on sale this month because this month is Menstrual Health Awareness Month. So you can get 2 books for $30 US. So it is on sale, a great time to get it and share it with the folks in your life, the young women, the sisters, the aunties, the cousins. I'll put the link in the chat for you, and I'll put the coupon code.
Very good.
Do you enjoy our content? Well, make sure to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you won't miss an episode.